Welcome back to Real Estate 101. Today we're going to continue our discussion on family law and talk a little bit about cheating. And I'm pleased to welcome Julie Tyas of Devery Smith Frank LLP. Julie, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, Julie, so I want to start today's show and I want to ask you, what should you do when you find out that your spouse is cheating on you?
Well, the first thing you have to think about is whether or not you want to end the relationship because of this. And it's obviously not a legal decision, that's a very personal and emotional decision. The first thing I usually advise someone who walks through the door and saying, my spouse cheated on me, I just found out yesterday, is maybe you should go speak with a counselor about this because they will be able to help you work through some of these issues alone or with your spouse and then help you decide whether you want to separate or not. If you do decide that you don't even want to go down that road, you just want to end the relationship right then and there, there's a few things that you should speak with a lawyer about to set yourself up from a custody perspective and from a financial perspective that will help you in the long run. If you do decide through therapy with your spouse, through counseling, that you do want to end the relationship together, that therapist will be able to help you come up with a plan to, for example, help your kids learn about how you're going to teach your kids or talk to your kids about how you're going to separate, what's going to happen next, all of these sorts of things. They are professionals who deal with this type of thing explicitly, and they will be able to help you with that.
Okay, Julie, so you touched on some people choosing not to stay in the relationship. If that happens, what is the most important thing that they should do?
Well, aside from speaking with a lawyer about what you need to be doing to set yourself up to be in a good position later on, you should begin to start collecting your own financial disclosure, which consists of tax returns, bank statements, that type of thing, because you're going to need those later on. And if you do have a suspicion that your spouse may act a bit fishy throughout the process and may start to try to hide their own assets, you may want to, if possible, copy their financial disclosure as well. Just make sure that you put everything back the way you got it, because you don't want to be accused of stealing anything.
All right, so can someone just hypothetically go and change the locks on the home?
If it is a matrimonial home, which is a legal term for the home that you're living in at the time of separation, if you're married, you can't just change the locks on the home, no matter who owns the actual property. So regardless of who's on title, you can't just change the locks on the home if you're married. There's possessory rights that, excuse me, both people are entitled to live in the home, regardless of who owns the home. Now, if you're in a common law relationship and one person owns the home, you can change the locks on the home. In doing so, you just have to realize that your spouse will probably call the police and they'll have to make an appointment to come in and gather their personal belongings from the home. You also need to be a bit careful with that too if there are children involved, even if you're not married and you're in a common law relationship and you change the locks. You don't want to be locking out your children with their spouse, nor do you want to be keeping the kids in and preventing your spouse from having access to the kids, because a judge will not look highly on you if your spouse marches off to court to have to seek access and custody of the kids.
All right, so what happens if you're not married and you're common law and you change the locks on your spouse? Can you just start throwing their stuff out?
No, even though you have the legal right to change the locks, you don't have the right to dispose or discard of your spouse's belongings, no.
Okay, so what happens to joint bank accounts?
Well, what you want to do with respect to your bank accounts is just maintain the status quo. So if your mortgage, your taxes, your other bills came out automatically of the joint account, you want to make sure that the same method of putting money in stays the same even after you separate, at least until you come up with an agreement or there's a court order setting out how exactly the money should be dealt with. Also, you don't want to be taking out large chunks of money from the joint bank account unless that was a pattern during your marriage, which typically it's not, because then you could be accused of moving around assets or trying to hide them.
All right, so let's touch on that a little bit. Let's say one spouse notices a big depletion of funds in a joint bank account. What do they do?
Unfortunately, these are the situations usually where you do have to go to court. most often, to get an order freezing the other person's assets. The last thing you want to do is start also taking money out of a different account and moving it elsewhere in order to just do the exact same thing that your spouse is doing, because a judge won't look highly on that. What you want to get is you want to get an order freezing the spouse's assets and an order that person trace where they pulled the money from and where they put it.
Okay, Julie, so what approach should you take when telling your children about the situation?
Well, I would never advise anyone who's telling their kids why they're separating to inform them that one of their parents has had an affair. I can't think of any situation where that would be helpful, because it's only going to hurt your kids and potentially cause long-term damage. What you don't want to do as well is bring that up and potentially show a court that you have been bad-mouthing or disparaging your spouse in front of the kids, because that won't help you gain custody or access to your kids.
All right, so does the person who cheats, do they automatically lose everything? Do they give up everything?
Unfortunately for the non-cheater, we have a no-fault divorce system in Canada. So the person's behavior during the marriage, when it comes to faithfulness, has no bearing on property division
or equalization,
or support, or equalization. It really only comes into play if in a small number of cases where custody and access are an issue, and the person potentially is bringing their new partner into their children's relationship or lives too soon, then it can come up. But generally, no, it doesn't have any bearing.
All right, Julie, so for today's final question, what is the most rational approach for someone that is going through a situation like this?
Well, primarily you want to stay calm. As difficult as it is in a situation like this, you don't want to bring the adultery into the separation for the sake of your kids primarily. From a financial perspective, you don't want to be harping on that. You want to focus on the issues that you have to focus on to come up with a separation agreement that you're both happy with. And most of all, you don't want to run off and do something you're going to regret. So it is important to speak with someone about how to avoid acting in haste and stay focused on the issues that are going to be coming up in your separation.
All right, Julie, great stuff. I want to thank you for coming on today's show and hope to see you again sometime down the road.
Thank you very much.
So there you have it. If you're going through a situation like this and need the help of a family lawyer, get in contact with Julie Tyas at Devery Smith Frank LLP. I'm your host, Joe Terceira. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.